Morning and welcome to Just the News AM. I'm Sophie Mann and today is Wednesday, May 5th, 2021. This morning, we're expecting the decision by Facebook's oversight board determining whether or not the social media platform will uphold a lifetime ban on the former president from the platform on which he was quickly suspended following the January 6th Capitol breach. We'll be speaking with Rachel Bavard, an expert in the fields of law and big tech, about that decision in just a few minutes. But guys, there's a lot going on today, so let's get right into it. Derek Chauvin's attorney is seeking a new trial for his client following the verdict last month that found the former officer guilty on 2 counts of second-degree murder and 1 count of third-degree murder in connection with the death of George Floyd. The cumulative effect of the multiple errors in these proceedings deprived Mr. Chauvin of a fair trial in violation of his constitutional rights, reads the filing. One specific issue that was identified was the denial of a motion for a venue change. The court abused its discretion when it failed to sequester the jury for the duration of the trial, or, in the least, admonish them to avoid all media, which resulted in jury exposure to prejudicial publicity regarding the trial during the proceedings, as well as jury intimidation and potential fear of retribution among jurors, which violated Mr. Chauvin's constitutional rights to due process and a fair trial, reads the statement by his attorney. Earlier this week, it was uncovered that one of the jurors who ultimately decided Chauvin's fate at trial had attended a rally in Washington, D.C. on the anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s famed "I Have a Dream" speech late last year. The march in question was reportedly called the Get Your Knee Off Our Necks March. Members of Floyd's family addressed the crowd, though Brandon Mitchell, the jury member in question, says it was not a march that took place for George Floyd. On the jury questionnaire, Mitchell had answered no when asked if he had engaged in any events protesting police brutality or police utilization of force. Mitchell says he understood the march he attended to be directly correlated with the anniversary of MLK's speech, as well as a get out the vote effort for the upcoming presidential election. On Capitol Hill, as Liz Cheney's star continues to fall, New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik has reportedly begun making calls and building support among her colleagues to assume the role of the next House GOP conference chair. As we discussed yesterday, it is likely that Cheney will face a second vote of no confidence from her caucus in the coming days, and if she does not survive, Stefanik is positioning herself as a viable alternative for the number 3 Republican leadership position. While caucus leader Kevin McCarthy was caught on a hot mic yesterday saying he was done with Liz Cheney and has reportedly been quietly whipping votes for Stefanik, Congressman Steve Scalise, the second-ranked Republican in the House, is outwardly supporting Stefanik's bid. Congressman Lance Gooden of Texas said on Tuesday that he suspects Elise Stefanik will become the next new conference chair sometime in the next 2 weeks. Stefanik was elected to the House in 2014 and gained national prominence for her defense of then-President Donald Trump during his first impeachment trial. Recently, Stefanik has turned her attention toward electing Republican women. She recruited and supported a number of successful House candidates during the last election cycle through her fundraising committee, EPAC. Late last week, Idaho Governor Brad Little signed Idaho Bill 377 into law, which prohibits any state school in Idaho from elementary through higher education from teaching critical race theory. Idaho is the first state to officially ban this doctrine. Other states are considering similar options, as the Education Department has proposed financial grants that could encourage schools to incorporate teaching and learning practices that reflect the diversity, identities, history, contributions, and experiences of all students. This morning, I'd like to welcome back to the show Education Fellow at the Heritage Foundation, Jonathan Butcher, to talk about this subject some more. Jonathan, good morning.
Great to be with you.
So what do we make of this newest law out of Idaho?
So the Idaho proposal, which has now been signed, it says that no teacher or students specifically, because it zeroes in on students, can be compelled to affirm or adhere to the ideas that one race is superior to another. So this is very important because such ideas would violate existing federal law anyway, right? The Civil Rights Act specifically talks about how we should not be the federal government and any government cannot treat students or individuals differently based on the color of their skin. So Idaho's proposal is a step towards making sure that state education officials align their teaching with federal law.
Okay, so I mean, this is, again, as I mentioned, one of the first actual bills to have been signed, formal legislation that will go into practice, that schools receiving state funding of any sort will be banned from teaching this type of ideological philosophy to students. What other states can we be looking at right now who are passing similar legislation? I recall a couple of weeks ago, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis said he was moving on a similar type of legislation. Where is this fight currently taking place in the legislatures?
So that's a good question. I would say that the Idaho bill doesn't actually ban critical race theory from being discussed in schools, and legislation should not do so. I don't think that we should say that students or teachers cannot discuss what's a part of critical race theory, but that's different from doing what Idaho's proposal does, which is say that students cannot be forced to believe, affirm, or say that they believe that one race is superior to another. That's an important distinction. Some of the other proposals include Oklahoma, as well as Texas. Those are other states that are considering similar proposals that would also talk about whether or not critical race theory can be discussed in class, or whether students can be compelled to believe what is in critical race theory. I would note that the federal proposal that you mentioned a moment ago, it would give educators points on their grant proposals if they include critical theory in their proposal to receive money to teach history and civics. Now, remember, many of the principles of critical race theory do call for the different treatment of people based on the color of their skin. This isn't just about diversity. This is about telling people that they should treat others differently. And that's why the state proposals are so important.
So these state proposals, I mean, specifically this one in Idaho, you've done a good job outlining it. It doesn't specifically ban the teaching of this idea. It's more about, is it more of a First Amendment case, would you say? You cannot tell students you must affirm before your class and peers, I am subservient to this person or that person. Is this a First Amendment case we're looking at?
Well, it's sort of asking, it's saying that students don't have to say or affirm that they believe that one race is superior to another. So that's different than saying, well, we can discuss what Marx taught, or we can discuss what happened in the Soviet Union, or even the idea that America is a pluralistic society, which is an important concept. It's very different, though, from what these diversity trainings are telling students, that white individuals, for example, are guilty of things that they may never have been a part of themselves decades ago, when America did have Jim Crow laws, or even prior to that, institutions of slavery. Those things should be condemned. But that's different from telling students today that because of America's past, people from certain ethnic backgrounds or even national origin should be treated differently or somehow guilty. This is an important distinction.
Jonathan, what is the pushback on this type of bill in Idaho looking like? I mean, I've seen a couple of comments from teachers in the public school system over there that say, this undermines the experience of some of our African American students and, what their perhaps ancestors in this country went through. What is the response to this?
Well, so far, the pushback has been much of what you outlined, this accusation that proposals like this will prevent certain concepts from being discussed in the classroom, or that somehow students will be underserved because they don't get a full picture of American history. I don't think any parent or teacher wants that. I think what we should be aware of, though, is that some of this material from diversity trainings, from critical race theory, from the idea that some people are guilty just by the color of their skin, actually would violate any reasonable interpretation of federal civil rights law. So we must make sure that educators are aware that, it's one thing to talk about it in class. It's another thing to tell students that they should believe that one individual is superior to another based on an immutable characteristic.
What do you think the implementation of this looks like on the ground? I mean, we know that historically, it's been very difficult to control what goes on in the ivory tower, what goes on even in our children's classrooms. Do you think it's truly possible to prevent teachers from explaining the theory, but then stopping just shy of, telling the children who are under their supervision to actually believe it?
Well, I think you can teach what the principles of critical race theory are and not simultaneously tell students that they should go protest at the Capitol on a certain piece of legislation, or tell students that they should march on a certain cause if they don't believe it. And I think that's some of what this critical instruction tells students to do. In fact, that's one of the principles of critical theory, is that it should be applied, that the ideas are meant to be applied. So I think that that is what is going to separate just instruction about these ideas from telling students to affirm or believe something. I think the way that this can be enforced really comes through those who are watching over what happens in schools already: school board members, principals, and educators themselves. I think they were already responsible for forming academic standards, for approving curriculum, and so now they should be watching that these materials don't have students engaging in activism or protesting something that they may not affirm or believe already, right? Forcing them to say something that they don't believe.
Jonathan, thank you so much for weighing in on this subject this morning. I think it continues to be an interesting debate, and we will continue to assess the trend lines of this fight as it continues in state legislatures and across the country. We'll catch up soon, Jonathan. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Breaking news now. The Facebook Oversight Board has made their decision on Facebook's ban of Donald Trump. They are going to uphold their decision to keep the former president off of the platform. Coming up next, right here on Just the News AM, we'll be breaking down that decision with an expert in the field of law and big tech and all of the implications of what we've just heard this morning. That's next.